All right, we're going to try to mix things up a little bit here and kind of let you work at your own pace. So, the next part of chapter 3, I'm going to kind of approach it like this, and we'll see how we do from here. You will have, when you are done outlining, you'll have a mini assignment on Canvas that you can do, but again, only when you're done with outlining. So, we talked last week, or I think Tuesday rather, about the ever-changing work environment and the new responsibilities that managers face uh, in terms of an ethical standpoint. We talked about shareholder theory. We looked at the who a company should be responsible for. Again, is the whole shareholder theory. That's R. Edward Freeman. Then we talked about how there were two different types of stakeholders, internal and external. And again, if you look at this diagram, the internal stakeholders are those that are directly involved in the company: employees, owners, board of directors. And then the two rings outside are the external stakeholders, task environment being those stakeholders that the company is involved with but and has an influence on, but who does not directly work within the company. And then the general environment are forces outside of the company's hands that they have no control over. Okay, so again, task environment, general environment. Those are the two examples, like I said, of the or two types of the external stakeholders. Okay, talked about task environment, and again, those are the ones. The task environment are those external stakeholders that the company can influence and somewhat control. The general environment, again, are things that affect the company that are basically out of the company's hands. Examples of the general environment go up here so you can see it: economic forces, technological forces, social culture forces, demographic forces, political legal forces, and international forces. This should have been a review from Tuesday, from what we talked about. This is about as far as we got on Tuesday, and then you had your assignment over the stakeholder theory. Now we're going to talk about the actual ethical responsibilities that managers have. Economic performance versus social performance. Economic performance being what's the bottom dollar result. Social performance being what's the impact on society that the company is having thanks to the leadership of a manager. So we got these two things, ethics and values, that we looked at earlier. Ethics are those standards of right and wrong that influence our behavior. Okay, so therefore then ethical behavior is the behavior that we envision or that we perceive to be right as opposed to wrong. The values are then are those beliefs that we have that then help govern or help determine what our ethics should be. Something you'll need to know for the test is this thing down here called value system, which is the pattern of values within an organization in order to be a truly successful. And when we say successful, just so we're all on the same page, when we say successful, we're not just talking about financially, okay? We're talking about the impact that a company has on society. If the impact is great, or the greater the impact, rather, in my opinion, and in most opinions, the more successful the company will be or is. So the value system is how kind of the belief or thought process or value within the organization. That's value system. Now, you're going to run into times, and maybe those of you that are working right now are having this issue at your part-time jobs, but it will get more intense the older you get and the more in-depth or involved in your actual career you get. The higher you go, maybe up the corporate ladder, so to speak, the more chances of you running into an ethical dilemma, or the higher the chances of you running into an ethical dilemma. And again, an ethical dilemma is a situation in which the manager has to decide whether to pursue a course of action that may benefit you or the organization, but that is unethical or even illegal. And I'd like to also put could be legal as well. We talked earlier that an unethical decision or unethical action doesn't necessarily have to mean that action is illegal. Okay, so be careful when you see unethical. That doesn't always mean illegal, and that pretty much is the whole dilemma that a manager is going to run into. The decision might be legal, but is it ethical? Okay, so that is an ethical dilemma. There are 4 approaches to handling ethical dilemmas, and we're going to look at each one here. Utilitarian approach, individual approach, moral rights approach, and the justice approach. So let's look at the first one. This is what, and again, when you're looking at an ethical dilemma, these 4 things are how you make decisions, okay? These different approaches will help you make a decision. You as a manager will help you make a decision using one of these approaches, okay? So if you look and focus at what is best for the greatest number of people within the company, what is best for the company and everyone involved, or the greatest number of people involved, then you're looking at the utilitarian approach, which is basically the greater good, what's best for the greater good, okay? Second one, individual approach, you can kind of figure it out with the term, but this is what will result, and again, when we say individual, we're talking about the company as a whole, okay? So what will result in the company's best long-term interests, okay? And people that have an individual approach to an ethical dilemma look at it because they are focusing just on what's best for the company. They therefore can justify that decision, whatever that decision is, as being ultimately best for everyone being those involved in the company, everyone's self-interest, or everyone's what's best for them, okay? Third one is the moral rights approach, which is guided by respect for the fundamental rights of human beings. This decision, or the approach when you look at an ethical dilemma, taking a moral rights approach, your decision is based basically on what is right versus what is wrong, not what is best for the company or what is best for the individual. It is purely looking at what is right in terms of based on our society's ethics and our values that we talked about earlier. And then finally, the justice approach is basically guided by respect for impartial standards of fairness and equity. So basically saying that the decision we're going to make is based on what is just or fair to those that aren't necessarily represented as much. So in the company, let's say, if there's a big disparity between the worker and the CEO in terms of pay, which more than likely there is, then the ethical dilemmas, or the response to an ethical dilemma using the justice approach, will be guided by this injustice of income disparity. Okay, if that makes sense. So here is a great pro-con type thing. Right, the positive side of each approach is on one side, and then the negative side, or con, is down here on the other. So let's look at the first one, the utilitarian approach. The pro, or the positive, is it weighs the cost benefit of whatever decision you are making. What's the cost of making this decision relative to the benefit or the outcome of it, right? And if the benefit outweighs the cost, that's the route you're going to take, okay? Now, the flip side of that, or the negative side of that, is that it's not always a popular decision or popular approach. For instance, if you need to cut costs, laying off 1,000 workers isn't going to make those 1,000 workers happy, right? Going to the individual one, act ethically in the short run to avoid others harming you in the long run. Okay, so we're going to do the right thing to protect our image, so then down the road we will be better off. Okay, that's the individual approach. The negative is one person's short-term self-gain may not be good for everyone in the long term. So the company necessarily doesn't represent at times every single individual within the company. Okay, however, using the individual approach, that's kind of what your whole thought process is. Moral rights approach is guided by the fundamental rights of human beings. We talked about that. And then the negative side to that, though, is that the employer versus employee rights are questioned. So the example or the question, should employees on the job have a guarantee of privacy? So, is it right to be able to search through an employee's email? Is it right? Like right now here at Homestead, Mr. Ginder can pull up my entire email history and look at every single email that I've ever sent while here at Homestead if he wanted to. Okay, is that okay? The moral rights approach says that it is. Justice approach, respect for impartial standards of fairness and equity, making sure that things are fair and even. The con is that there is a very, very broad definition of fairness. What is fair? Is it fair that, or should the worker make just as much as the CEO? Is it fair that the CEO makes, 10 times more than a worker? Some would argue, well, the CEO has a lot more responsibility, experience, decision-making power, and so on. So he or she should be paid more. But again, that's kind of the con or the argument when we talk about the justice approach. Okay, here is an ethical dilemma situation that was made up. I'll read it to you, and then I want you to think about it. Company X is a large manufacturing facility in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with 2,500 employees. The company is getting a lot of pressure from stockholders to improve its bottom line, which are profits. Okay. Now, here are the 4 options based on the 4 different approaches, right? These 4 approaches, here are the options based on those 4. So option 1, utilitarian approach, let go 1,000 employees, so 40% of its workforce. The layoff would increase profits, which would ultimately increase the value of the company's stock. Option 2, you could offer a buyout program for anyone who voluntarily retires or leaves the company. Option 3, do nothing because the employee has right to work and earn a living within the company. Option 4, reduce the bonus structure and salary of company leadership. Okay, so think about right now in your head what you would do in this situation if you were a decision maker high up, either a member of the board or the president or CEO, something like that, and you were faced with this dilemma. Okay, you have 2,500 employees and you're getting a lot of pressure to improve your bottom line. You have to make cuts, or you have to not make cuts. You have to improve the bottom line somehow. Okay, whether it be by making cuts or doing something else. So think about, if you're in that situation, what you would do as a manager. Okay. On Canvas, there will be an exit slip, or there is an exit slip there that kind of just reiterates some of the things that we talked about today. If you have any questions, let me know. I also would like some feedback on what you thought of this process with me doing this video, letting you kind of go at your own pace, stuff like that. So there will be a little bit of a survey, if you will, whatever, on Canvas as well, to kind of give me some feedback on whether or not you like this.